Hello everyone, I'm Giulia Cattaneo, a student of Theories and Methodologies of Digital Learning at UniMore, and for the 2025-2026 academic year, I am an ambassador for UniMore of UNIgreen. As some of you know, December 3rd is the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, established by the United Nations to promote the rights, well-being, and full inclusion of people with disabilities. It is an opportunity to raise public awareness of the challenges they face and to promote their active participation in society. That's why we have with us today Dr. Giacomo Guaraldi, who is the Rector's Delegate for Disability and SLD, University Disability Manager, Working Package 5 member on the theme of Diversity, Inclusion and Multiculturalism of UNIgreen, and Welcoming Contact Person for Students with Disabilities and SLD. I'll ask Dr. Guaraldi right away, what value does this day have for you, both from a professional and personal point of view?
First of all, thank you for the invitation. It is important to think about the culture of disability, not only on December 3rd, the International Day of Disability, but every day of the year. I am Giacomo Guaraldi. I am the Rector's Delegate for Disability and Specific Learning Disorders at the University of Modena and Reggio Emilia, Disability Manager and member of WP5 of the UNIgreen project. For me, December 3rd has a dual value. On a professional level, it is an important stimulus to reflect on what our society is doing in terms of inclusion, to promote the inclusion of people with disabilities. So it is a moment in which we reflect on what still needs to be done to raise awareness among citizens about the culture of disability and to promote the inclusion of people with disabilities. Let's remember that disability must become normality. We should not simply see people according to their disability, but instead we must see them by focusing on their true potential. As for the personal value, this day underlines once again the importance of being responsible, of our responsibility in promoting more and more a culture of disability that, I repeat, does not take into account the limits of people with disabilities, but rather their potential.
In this regard, I wanted to ask, within UniMore, what are the services and compensatory measures that are provided to students with disabilities?
All right. The University of Modena and Reggio Emilia is an exemplary university in this regard. Terms, it is a university that has always shown itself to be particularly sensitive to the culture of disability. We started in 2000 with just 13 students with disabilities. Today, there are over 370 students with certified disabilities. We are talking about students with a disability, particularly of a motor nature. Therefore, students who have walking difficulties, paraplegic students, tetraplegic students, followed by students with disabilities, sensorial, therefore visually impaired and blind, hearing impaired and deaf, to them, sometimes followed by other students with other types of deficits, such as students with a metabolic disability, oncological, a chronic disease, and finally, students with a mental or psychiatric disability. They too are growing. Along with these students, we also follow students with learning disabilities. Specific to learning, the university complies with two rules. Law 17 of 99, which protects students with disabilities, and Law 170 of 2010, which protects students with specific learning disabilities. Today, at our university, we have over 1,000 students with specific disorders of learning, and I repeat, approximately 370 students with disabilities. The university must guarantee these students the right to study and equal opportunities for training, study, and research, without falling into forms of pietism and welfare, but recognizing their potential. Therefore, to ensure the educational success of these students, the University of Modena and Reggio Emilia provides them with economic benefits, as the students with certified disabilities are exempt from university fees, but it provides them especially services such as the possibility of accessing a sport, a dedicated counter for them, a counter where they can ask for information, a help desk that acts as a mediator between the student and the teaching staff, between the student and the various university offices. The student with disabilities can request a whole series of university texts in accessible format, that is, in electronic format. Students with disabilities can request up to a maximum of 10 university books per year in electronic format. Students with disabilities can request a range of aids for free use for their entire university career. So we provide them with a personal computer, an iPad, a digital recorder, and various software. Everything that can allow them to gain greater autonomy and independence in their studies. And finally, a student can request to be assisted by a university tutor. The tutor, in our case, is a university student who is selected through an application process and who supports the student with a disability, facilitating their presence within the university environment and helping them pass their exams. So the tutor can support their peer with a disability in individual study by quizzing them, creating concept maps with them, and facilitating their learning. Finally, students with disabilities as well as students with specific learning disorders can benefit from compensatory measures during exams. I would like to emphasize that these compensatory measures are not simplifications, but are a way of putting students with special educational needs on an equal footing with others. The compensatory measures are as follows: the option of having extra time during a written exam, the option of splitting an oral exam into several parts, the option of taking an exam orally instead of in writing or vice versa, if the subject allows it, the option of taking the exam with certain aids, such as a video magnifier, a computer with voice synthesis, and so on. And finally, the option of taking the exam with concept maps or formula sheets. Obviously, in this case too, the concept map or formula sheet should not be seen as a simplification. But I repeat, it must contain the keywords and allow the student to use appropriate language and follow a logical thread. All these compensatory measures must be agreed upon with the university professor, who remains the expert on the subject and therefore has the final say in the decision at least 15 days before the exam. So in this way, by guaranteeing these compensatory measures and these services, students with disabilities can now participate in university life, be an integral part of our university, and achieve the highest academic qualifications.
So, besides the, you could say, exemplary case of Unimore, in your experience, what are the changes you've seen in the way institutions approach disability? And what, on the other hand, are the persistent barriers that still need to be improved, especially at an institutional level?
Well, first of all, I'd like to recall that Italy was the first country in the world in 1975 to eliminate special classes or segregated classes, meaning those classes where only students with disabilities were placed. Today in our country, students with disabilities are placed in classes with students who do not have disabilities at all different school levels and grades, including universities. So there has been a paradigm shift. In fact, we've moved from the medical model of disability, that is, the paradigm in which a person with a disability is seen as impaired, unable, a person essentially to be cured, to the biopsychosocial model of disability instead. And this is the ICF model, the International Classification of Functioning, Disability, and Health, which states that we shouldn't look at a person with a disability by focusing on their limits, but we must focus on their potential. We must bring out the hidden potential in a person with a disability. So I see this cultural shift in our society, a very important shift. A shift according to which a person with a disability must increasingly become the protagonist of their own existence. They shouldn't be a passive recipient, but must be, in fact, a creator of wealth. So this is the first change I have noted. The second change I see is that disability must become a form of normality. Today, a person with a disability is no longer the white butterfly, so to speak, that we must keep hidden, that we must keep secluded and marginalized on the fringes of society. Instead, a person with a disability must be an integral part of our society, and we must change our way of thinking, starting with breaking down architectural barriers. So our buildings should be free of architectural barriers. This is not only to help people with disabilities, but also to help others, for example, an elderly person, a mother with a stroller, and so on. So there must be a true cultural and ideological change. Today, we must no longer stigmatize people with disabilities, but we must see them as individuals with potential that has yet to emerge. And our society must make it so that this person can bring out that potential. The path is still long and we still have much to learn. There needs to be a cultural change throughout society. Unfortunately, even today in our country, a person with a disability is often stigmatized, considered a parasite on society. So we must carry out this important work of raising awareness across all school levels and grades. But something has certainly been done. And my hope is that people with disabilities can be recognized as individuals with great, indeed, potential for the future. So we must certainly not fall into forms of pity or welfarism. We must recognize, as I said, their potential. So we shouldn't limit ourselves, I repeat, to seeing the limits of a person with a disability, but rather their hidden potential.
I'll follow up on that answer to ask you one last question in conclusion. Could you give some advice to our listeners, both on an individual level and for an organization such as UNIgreen, on how to support inclusion?
Certainly. Well, a very simple suggestion is really not to fall into forms of prejudice or discrimination, not to have any prejudices about people with disabilities. Anyone who has the opportunity to work alongside a person with a disability will immediately realize the hidden potential in these individuals. And they will immediately notice the sensitivity of these people and the richness that diversity represents. So we must all, in our own small way, truly understand that diversity is a source of wealth, not a limitation for our society. That it is a source of wealth, and how each of us can promote the inclusion of people with disabilities by avoiding stigmatizing them and instead recognizing their dignity and, above all, their values and skills. So people with disabilities teach us that diversity is a source of wealth for our society. And only in this way can we truly make our society, our school, our university, an increasingly inclusive and welcoming environment. My hope is that our society can truly become more and more of an inclusive society, a society that recognizes diversity as a source of wealth, a society that seeks to bring out the hidden potential in individuals with disabilities.
I thank Dr. Guaraldi for being here with us today and for his valuable words. I invite all listeners to share this podcast and to follow for future episodes.